Dylan didn't go missing. Dylan went missing to us.
A local boy disappears just hours after arriving for a visit at his father's home. This was the photo of 13-year-old Dylan Redwine that was seen on missing posters shared across our state and the country. At the time, he lived with his mom here in Monument, but more than 300 miles away in this small mountain town outside of Durango is where the case begins. On November 18, 2012, Dylan arrived in the quiet mountain town of Vallecito for a court-ordered visit with his father. Phone records show he kept in touch with his mother, Elaine Hall, after leaving his home in Monument. Within an hour, the teen started making plans for the next morning with a friend nearby.
Dylan had a very set routine, and he was a very communicative fellow, both on the internet with Twitter and with his friends. And he had very specific, definite plans with his friends, and he never showed up for that. That's totally unlike Dylan.
His father, Mark Redwine, reached out to his ex-wife, seeing if she'd heard from their son. In text messages, Mark Redwine said he went into town for errands, and when he got back, Dylan was gone. Days passed by. Search crews combed the lake and rugged mountainside. His mother and brother, both part of the search effort.
Thank you for keeping your eyes open for Dylan, and let's bring him home because, he wants to be home.
The boy's father, the last to see his son alive, said he could be anywhere.
We don't know where Dylan's at. We have no idea where Dylan's at. My ex-wife and I both agree that Dylan's not the kind of kid that would run away. But I also think that there's a possibility that Dylan was torn between his parents.
Soon, the FBI got involved. They announced Dylan was not a runaway. Concern grew in southern Colorado.
I just hope he's just out there somewhere and that they find him alive and okay.
Investigators focused in on Mark Redwine's home, the last place Dylan was seen alive. What they found inside of this house would remain a secret for years. Search efforts stopped over the harsh winter, but as soon as the spring thaw hit Middle Mountain, crews were out again. What they found changed everything. Dylan's skeletal remains and pieces of his clothing were scattered around the mountain. Everything was found in an area investigators say the boy would not have gone on his own, but not far from his father's home. His brother Corey spoke with us about the devastating update.
It's definitely in a spot where it brings a lot of questions to how we got up there. It's hard waking up and not having that bright spot in my heart. He's always with me in everything I do from here on out.
Dylan's father also spoke with us over the phone.
I love Dylan very much, and he's a very important aspect of my life and always has been. And, I would never do anything to hurt him.
Almost 1 year after Dylan disappeared, the community held vigils to make sure he was not forgotten.
Those at the vigil remember the exact day when Dylan went missing. Then their message was of hope. Now they are focusing on justice for Dylan.
If it had been mine, I would just want to know how many people cared, even people who didn't know Dylan.
The teen's death was ruled a homicide. Investigators had a lot more questions to answer. The most important, who killed Dylan Redwine? Knowing that she would never see her son alive again was excruciating for Dylan Redwine's mother. From the moment the boy went missing, Elaine Hall was not shy about who she thought was involved. Years passed by after the remains of 13-year-old Dylan Redwine were found.
The biggest thing for us is, just the one person that did do this, just they get justice served to them.
No major update in the case was released until 2015. It was announced Mark Redwine was a person of interest. We spoke to a retired FBI profiler who helped investigators make that conclusion.
I have yet to be wrong on a case, and I'm not wrong on this one. Frankly, everybody involved in this knows what their status is.
I sat down with Dylan's mother back then, who was still heartbroken over the loss of her son, and she was not surprised her ex-husband was now officially connected to the boy's disappearance.
Dylan didn't go missing. Dylan went missing to us. Mark knew exactly where Dylan was on November 18th. Anybody who was innocent of a crime like this would actually defend themselves. And Mark has chosen to basically remain quiet, act like the victim, and chooses to just point fingers at everybody else.
At that point, she had one message for her son.
I miss you, Bobby, and we're working on getting justice for you. I'm sorry.
It would be nearly 2 more years before a grand jury indicted Mark Redwine for the murder of his son.
I think Dylan's been an instrumental part of this. I mean, it's like a chess game, and I believe he's moving the pieces accordingly. And I think that's why maybe it's taken as long as it has, so that every piece can be in place so that we can get a conviction.
The indictment revealed Dylan's blood was found in multiple locations of his father's living room, the corner of a coffee table, under a rug, and smeared across a love seat. A cadaver dog indicated the scent of human remains in the living room and in the bed of Mark Redwine's truck. Anthropologists determined Dylan's skull had sharp markings on it and signs of blunt force trauma. A warrant was issued for Mark's arrest.
Just keep your hands up. Don't move, bud, okay? Do not move.
Body camera video shows the moment officers took him into custody out of state in Washington.
You guys can, you'll explain to me what's going on? Yes, sir. Is your name Mark? Yes, it is.
The district attorney explained what took 5 years to make an arrest.
We wanted to take our time, be methodical, and do things correctly. Time was on our side, and we took advantage of that opportunity. And now it's time for justice for Dylan.
We asked Elaine about having to wait all that time. She told us the only person she blamed is Mark.
How could you do that to your own son? My frustration lies exclusively and solely with him, because if it were not for his actions, I wouldn't have to be frustrated with the DA or the law enforcement or anybody else. So I place all of this squarely on his shoulders. He is the one who made his decisions. He is the one that took our son's life away. And he is the one who needs to, own up for that.
Mark was soon extradited back to Colorado.
We're going to do everything within our power to keep this case here within the Plata County so that our residents can be part of the resolution of this case and see that justice is done.
He pleaded not guilty to the murder of his own son. The family's attention now turned towards justice in the courtroom. Unforeseen circumstances would continue to push the trial back. Only then would troubling details about a possible motive be released. A series of delays and mistrials would push off the accused killer's day in court. One was due to Mark Redwine's attorney getting in legal trouble of his own and having to leave the case. Then there were 2 mistrials blamed on COVID-19 concerns. Finally, the trial began earlier this year. I sat down with Dylan's mother and brother to talk about the last step in the nearly decade-long journey for justice. When the murder trial against Mark Redwine began, few people were allowed inside the courtroom as a pandemic precaution. Dylan's mother and brother were there. What was it like to finally sit there and see your ex-husband and see your dad in court facing charges for murder?
The outcome, regardless of, we need our day for Dylan. We need to have our voices heard because his voice was silenced.
Dylan had power. We all felt the presence of Mark losing control on the mistake he made.
The trial was streamed online. Dylan's mom was called to testify.
I said, Dylan, please be safe. Mom is here to come get you, son.
Dylan's mom read out loud the last text she sent him after he had disappeared. Like most teenagers, Dylan was attached to his phone. Records show not long after this conversation with his friend, the night he arrived to his father's house, Dylan's phone goes dark.
Just to think about my son's last moments and my son's last reactions, and I try not to think about his death and how that occurred.
The prosecution painted the picture of a strained relationship between the boy and his father, something Dylan's family says was clear to them even before Dylan left for that court-ordered visit.
The fact that Dylan had to go down there for that Thanksgiving trip, even though Mark and him had no contact.
They shouldn't be forced into a position that makes them uncomfortable.
The prosecution offered a possible motive for the alleged murder, a fight over disturbing pictures Dylan had found of his dad.
He found pictures of Mark dressed in women's clothing, wearing a diaper, taking selfies of him wearing the clothing, wearing the diaper, eating the feces that was in the diaper.
Mark Redwine's defense team argued he would never hurt his son. They suggested Dylan ran off and was attacked by animals on the mountain.
Those marks are quite consistent with an animal trying to either grab the cranium and take it away.
That was an expert for the defense, but he did agree with the prosecution that those animal markings on Dylan's remains happened after his body was dumped on the mountainside.
To stand up in front of you and say, you don't have enough now because I left my son there to be eaten by scavengers, and he wants to benefit from that? He doesn't get that benefit. Not when there's enough evidence to convict, ladies and gentlemen.
They are creating this narrative about rage and anger and photos and deteriorating relationship, and they want you to latch on to this story because the actual physical evidence in the case does not support that Mark Redwine killed his son.
In the end, Mark Redwine chose not to testify. Then his fate was in the jury's hands. A 5-week-long trial, and after just 6.5 hours, a verdict was in.
Jury verdict count number 1, murder in the second degree. We, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Redwine, guilty of count number 1.
I smiled when the guilty verdict was read. There are no disputing the facts. You can say it all day long that you didn't do this, but if you sat through trial like we did, there is no doubt that we got the right person.
The family will face Mark again in less than a week when a judge will decide his sentence.
Mark gave Dylan the life sentence. He knew it was wrong. He lied about it for 9 years. He kept Dylan from us. You know, he fed him to wildlife. If this doesn't get the maximum sentence, then I don't know what does. He's my father, but he killed my little brother, and we're gonna make sure that he gets what he deserves.
It's been a long journey to get to this point, 9 years since Dylan first disappeared, but for his family, Dylan was never really gone.
He's still an instrumental piece of our everyday life. I do not want my grandbabies growing up without, Dylan in their life as well.
Corey, now a father himself, even passed Dylan's name down to one of his kids.
We will never stop carrying his spirit and his love for his friends and his family. It's important for us to just cherish the moments that we had with Dylan while he was here and hold on to those forever, and never let, the situation that he was in be what defines him.
Elaine and Corey tell me they will be forever grateful for everyone who helped support their family over the years. Mark Redwine will be sentenced in 5 days. The 60-year-old faces up to 48 years in prison for second-degree murder. Elaine and Corey will be there. They hope, in the end, the judge's decision will finally bring justice for Dylan.